how special is it? Well, it's not every day that you can get William Shatner. And we have managed to gather them together for what we are calling a Star Trek Summit. It's an opportunity to talk about Star Trek and the films and other points of interest.
For decades, Star Trek has boldly explored the future, but some episodes went so far that they were quietly pulled, heavily censored, or outright banned. These weren't minor controversies. They touched on fear, control, and human behavior in ways that made broadcasters deeply uncomfortable. What looked like simple science fiction often carried something far more unsettling beneath the surface. And once you see what these episodes actually reveal, the reaction becomes impossible to ignore. So why were these 3 Star Trek episodes considered too dangerous to air, and what were they really exposing that no one wanted to face? Signals they silenced. For years, Star Trek was seen as a bold but hopeful vision of the future, a series that promised adventure, discovery, and unity across the stars. On the surface, it looked like safe entertainment, something families could watch together without much concern. But beneath that polished exterior, certain episodes carried ideas that unsettled those responsible for deciding what audiences should and should not see. Quietly, without much public attention at the time, a handful of these stories were pulled back, restricted, or simply never shown again in certain regions. What makes this even more intriguing is that these decisions were not random. Broadcasters, including major networks like the BBC, began drawing lines that were never clearly explained to viewers. Episodes that had already aired elsewhere were suddenly considered inappropriate, too intense, or too controversial for general audiences. Some were delayed for years, while others disappeared entirely from scheduled repeats. Official explanations often pointed to concerns about violence, disturbing themes, or suitability for younger viewers. Yet, those reasons rarely told the full story. At first glance, it might seem surprising. After all, Star Trek was not known for graphic imagery or explicit storytelling. Its power came from suggestion, from ideas layered beneath dialogue and character decisions. But that subtlety may have been exactly what made certain episodes more dangerous in the eyes of those in control. Instead of presenting obvious threats, these stories explored deeper fears, questions about human nature, authority, identity, and morality. They placed familiar characters into situations where the line between right and wrong blurred in uncomfortable ways. As these episodes pushed further, the reactions grew stronger. Some viewers felt uneasy, while others were deeply affected by what they had seen. Complaints began to surface, not always in large numbers, but enough to raise concern. Networks faced a dilemma: continue airing content that challenged boundaries, or quietly remove it to avoid potential backlash. In many cases, they chose the safer path, limiting exposure and controlling how often or if these stories could be seen again. Still, there is another layer to consider. The official reasons focused on surface-level concerns, but many believe the real issue went deeper. These episodes did not just entertain, they confronted ideas that reflected real-world tensions. By disguising them within science fiction, the show managed to explore topics that might have been rejected outright in any other setting. But even that disguise had limits. When the message became too clear, too close to reality, it crossed an invisible threshold. That is where the mystery begins. If these episodes were simply too intense, why were others with similar elements allowed to air? And if the concern was truly about protecting audiences, what exactly were they being protected from? As the list unfolds, each story reveals another piece of the puzzle, hinting that the bans were not just about what was shown, but about what those stories dared to suggest. If Star Trek was meant to inspire a hopeful future, then why did certain episodes make broadcasters so uncomfortable that they were quietly removed or never shown again? What exactly was crossing the line, and who decided where that line should be drawn in the first place? Stay with us. Number 3. The Kiss They Feared. What begins as a routine mission quickly turns into something far more unsettling for the crew of Star Trek. Captain James Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura find themselves trapped on a distant world controlled by a group that appears refined, intelligent, and strangely theatrical. But beneath that calm exterior lies a disturbing truth. This society uses its advanced mental abilities not for progress, but for control. They manipulate others like puppets, forcing them to act against their will for nothing more than their own amusement. At first, the situation seems strange but manageable. Kirk and his officers attempt to reason with their captors, believing logic and diplomacy might still work. Instead, they are met with cruelty disguised as entertainment. The captors take pleasure in humiliating them, using their powers to strip away dignity and autonomy. Strip away dignity and autonomy. Movements become forced, voices lose freedom, and resistance becomes impossible. What unfolds is not just physical control, but psychological domination, pushing the crew into a situation where they are fully aware, yet completely powerless. The tension builds toward a moment that would leave a lasting mark on television history. Under direct mental control, Kirk and Uhura are forced to move toward each other. They struggle internally, their expressions revealing resistance, but their bodies obey commands they cannot fight. Then, in a brief but powerful instant, they are made to kiss. It is not a romantic gesture, nor a willing act. It is forced, uncomfortable, and deeply symbolic. At the time, it became known as one of the first interracial kisses shown on American television, a moment that challenged long-standing social boundaries. In the United States, the reaction was quieter than many expected. Network executives had feared backlash, especially from certain regions, yet widespread outrage never fully materialized. Many viewers accepted the moment, or at least chose not to oppose it publicly, but the response overseas told a different story. When the episode reached the United Kingdom, the BBC decided not to air it at all. The official explanation pointed to concerns about the episode's harsh tone and treatment of the characters, but some believed that was only part of the truth. There is reason to question whether the decision was truly about brutality alone. The episode did contain elements of cruelty and control, yet other episodes with similar intensity had been broadcast without issue. This raises a stronger possibility. Perhaps it was not the violence that caused discomfort, but what the moment represented. The forced kiss brought real-world tensions into clear focus, confronting audiences with ideas about race, power, and societal limits that many preferred to avoid. In that sense, the controversy surrounding this episode reveals something larger. It suggests that the boundaries being enforced were not only about protecting viewers from disturbing content, but also about controlling how far television could go in challenging existing norms. What appeared to be a single moment of science fiction may have exposed a reality that was far more difficult for some to accept. But what if this wasn't just about one shocking moment under control? Why did a single forced act cause such different reactions across countries? And what does it reveal about the limits of television at the time? And more importantly, what else was being hidden from audiences without them ever realizing it? Keep watching. Number 2. When identity breaks. Inside the controlled world of Star Trek, not all threats come from alien invasions or distant wars. Some of the most disturbing dangers come from the human mind itself. That becomes painfully clear when the crew of the Enterprise is sent to deliver medical supplies to Elba II, a high-security psychiatric facility meant to contain the most dangerous, criminally insane inmates in the Federation. What should have been a simple mission quickly turns into something far more unstable and unpredictable. Elba II is isolated, heavily guarded, and designed to hold minds that have completely broken from reality. The expectation is control, order, and strict containment. But when Kirk and Spock arrive, that expectation collapses almost immediately. The facility is no longer under authority. Instead, it has been taken over from within. The inmates are not just free, they are in charge. At the center of this chaos stands Garth of Izar, once one of Starfleet's most respected captains, known for discipline, leadership, and courage in battle. Something went wrong with Garth long before this moment. His reputation as a hero has been replaced by instability and delusion. He now believes he is destined for absolute power, not just over a prison, but over entire worlds. His mind shifts between clarity and confusion, making him unpredictable and dangerous. What makes him even more threatening is a unique ability to alter his appearance, allowing him to assume different identities at will. This ability turns trust itself into a weapon, as no one can be certain who they are truly dealing with at any moment. As Garth gains control of the asylum, the environment becomes increasingly unstable. Inmates follow his commands not out of loyalty, but fear and manipulation. Kirk and Spock are quickly captured, placed at the mercy of a system that has completely inverted itself. The line between sanity and madness begins to dissolve, not just in Garth, but in the entire structure around him. What follows is not simple conflict, but psychological warfare, where reality itself becomes unreliable. Garth's behavior grows more erratic as he tries to assert dominance over Kirk. He shifts between charm and rage, intelligence and delusion, testing emotional limits rather than physical strength. His shape-shifting ability deepens the tension as it becomes impossible to distinguish truth from deception. Every interaction carries uncertainty, and every decision feels like it could lead to collapse. The fear is no longer just about escape, but about identity itself being erased. This portrayal of instability and mental breakdown created discomfort beyond the screen. According to broadcast concerns, especially from the BBC, the episode's depiction of madness, control, and psychological violence crossed a line that was difficult to justify for general audiences. It was not only the actions that unsettled viewers, but the suggestion that even the most respected figures could lose themselves completely. In the end, the situation inside Elba Second becomes more than a prison story. It reflects a deeper fear about what happens when authority breaks down, and identity can no longer be trusted. Within the broader pattern of banned and restricted episodes, this story stands as another reminder that the most unsettling danger in Star Trek is often not alien, but human. Inside Elba Second, a simple mission unraveled as Garth of Izar fell into madness, control, and shifting identities, making trust impossible. If a mind can break this completely, what other limits were crossed in Star Trek? And how far can storytelling go before it becomes unwatchable? Let's find out. Number 1. When Time Forgot Humanity. On a quiet investigation beyond familiar space, the crew of the Star Trek arrives at what should have been an ordinary distress response. Instead, they step into something far more unsettling. The planet below appears almost identical to Earth, complete with abandoned buildings, silent streets, and a strange sense that life once existed there, but stopped without warning. There are no adults, no clear signs of order, only stillness that feels unnatural and wrong. The mission begins with curiosity. Captain Kirk leads Spock, Dr. McCoy, Janice Rand, and 2 security officers as they beam down to investigate. At first, everything seems frozen in time, like a preserved snapshot of a normal suburban world. But that illusion quickly breaks. A disfigured man suddenly appears and attacks them without warning. Moments later, he collapses in visible agony and dies, leaving the crew shaken and confused. This immediate shift from silence to sudden violence sets a disturbing tone that does not fade. Soon after, they encounter a young girl named Miri. She is frightened and defensive, refusing to trust the newcomers. She refers to them as grups, her word for grown-ups, and insists they do not belong. Through her, the crew learns that all adults on the planet were wiped out by a mysterious disease, leaving only children behind. These surviving children call themselves the Onleys, trapped in a world without guidance or stability. As the investigation continues, a far more disturbing detail emerges. The disease does not only kill, it distorts behavior before death. According to Miri, the adults became violent and unstable as the infection spread, losing control of themselves before eventually dying. Now, the same symptoms begin to appear in the landing party. Strange marks form on their skin, signaling that they too may be affected. What started as exploration quickly turns into survival. The deeper truth uncovered in an old medical facility reveals that the catastrophe was never meant to happen. It originated from an experimental attempt at extending human life. The result was unintended and devastating. The children, despite appearing young, are actually hundreds of years old, aging extremely slowly. Yet mentally, they remain childlike, unable to process the passage of time or the consequences of their situation. This contradiction creates a fragile and unstable society, where emotion overrides reason. Fear soon takes over the group of children. Without adults to guide them, they react with suspicion and aggression. An older boy named Jan becomes particularly controlling, stealing the crew's communicators and cutting off contact with the Enterprise. This loss of connection intensifies the danger. When McCoy attempts to develop a cure, progress becomes increasingly difficult due to interference and rising hostility. The children's emotional instability leads to a breakdown in order, escalating into violence and chaos. Some interpret the situation as a tragic outcome of failed science, while others see something deeper. The story raises uncomfortable questions about dependence, maturity, and what happens when responsibility is removed entirely from human development. The children are not evil, yet their actions become increasingly dangerous as fear replaces structure. This blurred line between innocence and threat creates a lingering discomfort that extends beyond the narrative itself. By the end of the crisis, what remains is not just a survival story, but a reflection on regression and lost guidance. Within the broader pattern of restricted and banned episodes in the Star Trek universe, this case stands out for how it transforms innocence into something unstable, suggesting that, without balance, even childhood can become a space of quiet horror. Some see failed science, others a deeper pattern of dependence, regression, and broken guidance systems. If innocence turns unstable when responsibility is removed, what does this reveal about the Star Trek universe? And what larger truth is being concealed? Stay glued. Hidden pattern revealed. Across the history of Star Trek, a quiet but consistent pattern begins to emerge when examining the episodes that were restricted, delayed, or outright banned. At first, each case appears separate, tied to its own unique controversy, its own moment of discomfort, and its own broadcast decision. But when placed side by side, they begin to form a disturbing pattern that goes beyond individual stories. What connects them is not just content, but the reaction they provoke from those responsible for controlling what audiences could see. In one story, a planet collapses under a mysterious disease that wipes out adults and leaves children trapped in a distorted version of time. In another, a forced moment of contact between characters exposes deep cultural tensions around identity and acceptance. And in a third, a once respected officer descends into madness, turning authority and identity into unstable weapons. On the surface, these narratives seem different, yet they all circle around the same fragile ideas: control, identity, and fear of collapse. Whether it is the body, society, or the mind, something essential is always at risk of breaking. The common thread is not simply violence or disturbing imagery, as often stated in official explanations. Instead, it is the uncomfortable reflection these stories cast back at reality. The idea of losing control appears again and again, whether through disease that removes stability, power structures that manipulate individuals, or mental breakdowns that erase trust in authority. Alongside this runs another theme: resistance to change. Questions of race, social boundaries, and human connection are not just background elements, but central tensions that challenge accepted norms. When examining how these episodes were handled, another layer becomes visible. Broadcast decisions, including those made by networks such as the BBC, were often explained in terms of audience protection or content sensitivity. Yet the pattern suggests something more complicated. Rather than reacting only to explicit content, these institutions were also responding to potential interpretation. The fear was not just what was shown, but how it might be understood. In that sense, censorship became less about images and more about ideas. There is also the possibility that Star Trek deliberately pushed boundaries. By placing complex issues in distant worlds, it explored sensitive topics through science fiction. This approach offered some protection, but not complete. When messages became too clear or closely tied to real tensions, some broadcasters resisted. This leads to a deeper interpretation of the bans themselves. Rather than viewing them as simple acts of restriction, they can also be seen as indicators of cultural discomfort. The episodes did not create controversy out of nothing. Instead, they revealed existing tensions that were already present in society. Fear of losing control, fear of changing norms, and fear of human unpredictability were not invented by the stories, but reflected through them. In the end, the bans reveal as much about audiences and institutions as the episodes. They were not only about removing content, but controlling how far ideas could spread. This raises a lasting question. Were they truly too dangerous or simply too honest for their time? The pattern points to a deeper tension between creative freedom and cultural limit, where what is restricted often reflects what society struggles to confront. Outro. So what do you think? Were these Star Trek episodes rightly banned for being too disturbing, or was censorship taken too far? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.